Well, good morning and welcome to the Insperity Business Resiliency webinar series. Today we're going to be talking about the topic of Secure 2.0. In a rare act of bipartisanship, the United States Congress in late 2022 passed a significant piece of legislation aimed at improving retirement readiness for working Americans, many of which are approaching an age where they are preparing to exit the workforce. And yet, with recent economic volatility and record inflation, current cost of living expenses are potentially prolonging that decision, as many seasoned employees have not been able to save enough for retirement to successfully transition into this next stage of life, given current market conditions. On the flip side, for many employees who are in the earlier or mid stages of their careers, the ability to begin saving for retirement has been potentially stunted by the need to focus on repayment of student loan debt, a number that currently exceeds more than $1.6 trillion and is impacting more than 1 in 4 Americans. In fact, according to Fidelity, 84% of borrowers cited the presence of student loans, often not fully repaid until someone's in their mid-40s, that has significantly impacted their ability to begin contributing to a retirement plan. And if you know anything about compounding interest, you know that those early savings years are essential to a successful end result. You just simply can never make up for lost time. So when this legislation was signed into law in December of last year, that action set into motion several new mandatory provisions and many optional ones, each designed to consider the needs of American employees at every stage of their employment journey, and to enable employers to have a newfound tactic in the war for talent. This issue is one that speaks to the very heart of your business's ability to remain competitive in an increasingly dynamic labor market. And more than that, it provides additional financial benefit options to round out your overall compensation strategy, meeting your team members right where they are, irrespective of their age or stage. So the question is your business poised to benefit from these new provisions? As we discussed in our last session on employee financial wellness, financially sound employees are engaged employees and they're far better off to bring their very best to their role, also to your customers and of course to your business day in and day out. And that's the bottom line impact of this discussion. It's growing your business by focusing on your most valuable investment, which is your people. So that's our topic for today, the Secure 2.0 Act, leveraging legislation to keep employee benefits competitive. And together, we'll unpack the various requirements and opportunities presented by this legislation, and then think creatively on how these new provisions can shape your overall human capital and business growth strategy. My name is Michael Leip. I'm host of the Insperity Business Resiliency webinar series, and I'm pleased to be joined by two of Insperity's foremost experts on these topics. First, I'd like to introduce John Stanton, Vice President of Retirement Services Operations here at Insperity. John has been a retirement plan professional for over 40 years, the last 20 being spent here at Insperity, where he's helped grow the business segment to more than $8 billion in participant assets. John, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to be here.
Great, thank you, John. Now, next, allow me to welcome Brian Chu, VP of HR Operations, who's recently joined us here at Insperity as well. Prior to that, Brian has served as an HR executive, helping organizations shape company cultures by enhancing technology-enabled people processes, driving outstanding service delivery, and leading total rewards programs in various industries. Brian, it's great to have you here as well.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Okay, guys, let's jump into this important topic. In my intro, we talked a lot about this new legislation. The Secure 2.0 Act was signed into law late last year. But before, John, I'm going to put this to you, but before we get into some of the details of the new provisions, the 2.0 aspect of this law refers to the fact that Congress really has been working on this for several years to make it easier for Americans to save for retirement. So how does this new act build off of those initial efforts made in the original Secure Act legislation that occurred in 2019?
Yeah, good question, Michael. So going back to the original Secure Act, it was because Congress believed that the U.S. retirement system, which really relies on employees making voluntary contributions to a 401k plan, they felt it was in crisis. And as they saw it, that first act was making progress in fixing that crisis by helping workers save. Made some modest changes to IRAs, such as raising the minimum distribution age and removing the time limit for making IRA contributions, the age limit, I should say. It also said that beneficiaries had to be paid out in 10 years, which is a part of the act that kind of paid for the other parts of it. So in the 401k space, though, the biggest change was a requirement that some long-term part-time employees be allowed to contribute to 401k plans. And then also there was a tax credit for businesses to set up 401k plans. And then Secure 2.0 has a much broader scope, over 90 provisions with a much wider impact, but the desired result of both of these was the same: to encourage more people to save and to encourage them to save more.
So we've seen obviously the legislation becoming front and center on this topic, and we've seen the rise of state mandated or even state sponsored retirement plans, wherein the state requires employers over a certain size to offer their own qualified retirement plan or offer that state plan to their workers. So we see that this is a movement on the rise from the legislative standpoint. And again, the goal of this rise in activity is all about boosting retirement savings. So Brian, I'd like to pose this question to you from an HR strategy standpoint. We really are in a place where retirement-centric compensation is really a table stakes for competitive talent now. Is that right?
Yeah, well, focusing on retirement, it's really one piece of the puzzle. Employers should be focusing on the well-being of the entire person. After all, you have employees that worked really hard their entire career, and we want to make sure they invest in their future self by saving for retirement. By having an employer-sponsored retirement plan, it's a financial safety net for folks transitioning from working to enjoying the next phase in life. And as you mentioned, we are in a debt crisis in this country. 1.6 trillion in student loan debt, 17 trillion in U.S. household debt, over 1 trillion in credit card debt. Financial stress is a common challenge for all of us, and understanding personal finance and how to deal with our finances isn't a really core part of what we learned in school growing up. In fact, some states are now even considering personal finance in their school curriculum, where some employers and retirement providers have offered this for a while now. So these legislative changes are a step in the right direction to build our country's financial knowledge. And as an employer, this is your opportunity to continue building towards that comprehensive financial wellness approach where your employees feel they have the resources available to them, where they are to meet them where they are in their financial wellness journey, and programs like saving, budgeting, and investing, while making retirement plans easy to access, creates that foundation. And that's what's table stakes for competitive talent today.
Such a good point. It really is a holistic approach from this standpoint. So I think we can't underestimate the importance of how that would be part of the strategy going forward. But John, I'm going to come back to you. With that foundation, I want to dig into now some of the specific provisions of the Secure 2.0 Act. And let's try to uncover what is new about this legislation and how it can address some of the most pressing issues that employees face today. And maybe we start with some of the foundational aspects of the Act. And I think the thing that maybe is most important for many people on the call, let's start with understanding the changes in the tax incentives that are available to employers on this front.
Yeah, and that's a good place to start, Michael, because we find that cost is one of the reasons that employers don't set up 401k plan. Whether actual or perceived cost of setting up a 401k plan can be a deterrent, along with some complexity and liability issues that they think that they're not ready for. And the employer-sponsored 401k system is really the foundation of retirement plans in the U.S. So that, along with Social Security, are two of the pillars for retirement that employers, that the government has for 401k plans. But the tax incentives in 2.0 really build on the incentives in the original Secure Act. And here's how it works. If an employer with fewer than 100 employees sets up a new plan, it can get a tax credit of up to 50% of its administrative costs for the first 3 years. And just to put in a plug, this can apply even if they're signing up for the Insperity 401k plan. So, additionally, if an employer has fewer than 50 employees, the credit is up to 100% of the costs. And those employers can also get a credit of up to $1,000 of their employer contribution to the employee's account. And just to point out again, these are tax credits, not tax deductions. So the government is actually paying employers to set up 401k plans, to encourage employers to set up those plans, and part of the cost for contributing to the plans. So I can't sit here and say how any given employer is going to be able to take advantage of that particular credit. That's something they're going to have to go back to their tax consultant to try to work through. But if cost was ever a deterrent for setting up a 401k plan, this kind of removes that. And then to make matters even better, this went into effect for 2023. So that's effective for this year that those credits are out there for employers to take.
Yeah, that's good information. And Brian, I want to come back to you. Obviously, as John's talked about, these tax credits have really essentially eliminated or removed significantly this barrier for entry to instituting a plan. So by offsetting some of these administrative costs and even contributions to our employees' retirement plan, now from a talent attraction standpoint and even a talent retention perspective, how does this further level the playing field for many small business leaders?
Sure. Attracting and keeping talent is critical for any business, and for small businesses that are looking to grow, it's a must. So the value of making retirement plans more accessible and affordable for small business owners, it's a competitive advantage for you looking for talent. Like, for example, early in my career, I worked in an HR technology startup company. And what I loved about that was the entrepreneurial culture where we got to wear many different hats and create opportunities to learn and grow quickly, but we didn't have the same benefits package that a large company did. A partnership with Insperity is the best of both worlds, where you can provide that entrepreneurial culture and opportunities while we can offer the safety and security of big company benefits at a reasonable cost. And now there are even more incentives to make it even more affordable. So having a retirement available for a small business helps employees feel that you're taking care of them, not only when they're working for you, but it makes a positive difference when talent is making choices about where they want to work and stay.
Yeah, Michael, if I could go back to, there were a couple of questions on my piece of it with regard to the tax credits that I want to jump in. And the gist of the question is, if I have an existing plan, do I get these tax credits? And the answer to that is no, unless you are in the first 3 years of having set that up. If you set it up in 2023, you get 23, 24, and 25 tax credits for that. But if you set it up, say, in 2019, there was an original tax credit with the original Secure Act that they could take advantage of, not quite as generous as this, but they would be able to take advantage of that original Secure Act tax credit if they met the other requirements.
Good. I think the details on this are obviously critical. And for those who are asking, yes, this will be recorded and it will be posted on Insperity.com under the resources section later today. So you can go back and review some of the details. We also have additional information on Insperity.com on the Secure 2.0 Act that you can find there. So let's jump into a little bit more detail, John. Some of the provisions of the law are required and others are optional. So can you take us through, let's start with the required provisions and provide some context on how these new requirements will be different for plan sponsors going forward.
Okay, good. Yeah, we can get started off there. A lot of provisions required. Like I said, there were 90 in the Act, but I'm going to just really focus on 6 that I think that our audience is really going to be interested in. So first one is, remember I said with regard to the Secure Act that certain long-term part-time employees were going to have to be allowed to contribute. That was for part-timers who had been with the company for 3 years and had worked at least 500 hours in each of those 3 years. So that goes into effect this coming January. So just 4 months from now, those long-term part-timers are going to need to be allowed in. What 2.0 did was to lower that requirement to 2 years of at least 500 hours. So there's going to be a 3-year requirement for those part-timers in 2024, and then a 2-year requirement starting in 2025. So that's part of the let's get more people in there contributing, saving for their retirement. The second provision, this is really one of the highlights of the Act, because it was, I think, the very first provision of the Act was that all plans started in 2023 and thereafter have to have an automatic enrollment and automatic escalation provision. Now, automatic enrollment means that someone is in the plan unless he or she elects not to be. So if Michael becomes eligible on 1/1/25, he is going to be automatically enrolled at a particular percentage unless he makes a decision not to, goes in there and takes out the deferral rate. And so that kind of changes the mindset when it comes to these plans. You're in unless you're out, whereas in previous years, you were out unless you're in. Automatic escalation then means that every year that rate is going to go up by 1%, unless, again, you go in and change it to a different amount. So Michael's originally enrolled at 3%. The next year it's going to be 4% and then 5% unless Michael goes in and makes an affirmative change to do otherwise. Kind of using the power of inertia there to get people to save by putting them in there until they take themselves out. Provision 3 is an enhancement in the catch-up limits. It's allowing for certain people ages 60 to 63 to have a higher catch-up limit than other people would have that are catch-up eligible. Now, catch-up means people who are 50 and over can put in more than people who are under age 50. And then for that 60 to 63 window, they get an even higher limit that they can go to try to catch up those people who are nearing retirement. Fourth is another raise in the minimum distribution age. I said it went up to 72 in the first Secure Act. Well, now it's going to be going up to 73 this year, and then it'll rise again to 75 in 2033. That's going to make sure people don't outlive their money by having to take out money too soon. Number 5, and this is going to impact the people who have simple plans, whether simple IRAs or simple 401k plans. Those that are the smallest ones, 25 employees or fewer, are going to be able to put in a little bit more than those who have more than 25 employees, unless those with more than 25 employees put in a minimum contribution amount. So incenting people to put in more, maybe incenting employers to put in a little bit more match, trying to up the what people are putting into these simple plans. And then last but not least is a requirement that affects people who are earning over $145,000 per year, what I'm calling high earners. These participants will have to make any of their catch-up contributions as Roth contributions. Now, just to clarify, Roth contributions are those that are taxed on the way into a plan, but then can be withdrawn tax-free, including the earnings are tax-free as well. So for high earners, they're going to get taxed when the money goes in, but they won't get taxed on it when it comes out. This was kind of, again, to help pay for some of the provisions in the plan by making taxes happen sooner than they might otherwise. But this was something that is going to affect anybody who earns over that dollar amount. Now, this was originally scheduled to be effective on January 1st of 2024. The IRS has concocted what they call an administrative transition period, which basically says they're not going to enforce this until 2026. Company could put this in place before then, but the IRS is not going to require it until 2026. So those are the required provisions. That's a lot of information on a lot of different provisions, but we're going to guide our clients through these changes as best we can. And some of the communication we're doing is to try to give them a flavor of how these things are going to affect them on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, there is a lot of detail here. And so, again, to answer some of the questions, all of this information is going to be posted on Insperity.com. This webinar recording will be there. There are resources you can find on Insperity.com that answer some of these questions. But obviously, everyone's going to have a unique question or something that's particular to them. So if you're an Insperity client and you have a 401k with us, I would encourage you to work with your service team and let's think about how these are contextualized to your particular situation. And again, if you either don't have a plan with us or you're looking at considering a plan, we would encourage you to reach out to our Insperity business performance advisors, and they can help facilitate those conversations going forward.
Right.
So, Brian, I want to come back to kind of think about this from an HR strategy standpoint. Obviously, the details are what they are. I think many of these required provisions are now seeking to support workers that are in their later stages of their careers, things like catch-up contributions and the like. It speaks to the reality that retirement planning has this direct connection to the ability to be successful in succession planning. So, given these new factors, how can employers use these new provisions to really design and implement this sort of a sound generational transition plan to help them do right by their people who've been with them for so long, but also do right by the business by introducing new or younger talent and particularly new innovation into the business? How do you balance that?
Sure. So, starting with over the last few years, the rising cost of living certainly impacted the lives of folks close to retirement. So, some cases, employees have delayed retirement because they just can't afford living without an income. Others who have retired are looking to return back to the workforce because of similar reasons and longer health spans. But in both of these examples, employers can take advantage of this opportunity. So, like you mentioned, if you haven't already, you can work with your service team and develop a succession plan for employees that are planning to retire. And that may look like creating some flexibility around the part-time schedules. And these roles could be key roles as mentors or staff augmenters during transition periods or project roles that allows you to keep the business running, prepares that next generation of talent while keeping a valuable institutional knowledge in your business. And plus, you're giving some of these employees that are close to retirement a way to phase into it. So instead of going to retirement cold turkey, you're giving them a warm turkey panini. So as an employer, these programs continue to build on your brand and culture by demonstrating that you value your people, you want them to stay, and you want them to grow. That could be another talent differentiator for you.
Very good. Okay, John, let's dive in again. Now we're going to tackle some of the optional provisions that were introduced by the Secure 2.0 Act. And like before, many of these have a particular emphasis on workers in specific stages of their career. So would you mind taking us through those topics?
Be happy to. And kind of to follow up on what Brian just said there, these are going to be some of the differentiators employers are going to have in their 401k plans. Different employers will have some of these optional provisions. Other employers will have something different. The list of optional provisions is pretty long. Again, I'm going to focus on just a few that I think are going to be really of interest to our audience. The first one I'm going to mention is what we've alluded to earlier. It is a student loan match. This allows a plan to treat a student loan payment as if it were an employer contribution for purposes of determining match. So, give an example. Let's say a participant makes $1,000 worth of student loan payments in 2024 and also makes a $2,000 contribution to the 401k plan. So $1,000 student loan payment, $2,000 401k plan. And let's say this particular employer matches dollar for dollar what the participant puts into their plan. That employer could decide it's going to match the student loan payment and the 401k contributions and put a $3,000 contribution into the plan, thus not mitigating, I'll use that word, the person who says, I can't afford to put a bunch of money in the 401k plan. The employer can choose to do that in his or her plan. So that's one of them. Another one I'm going to mention is Roth employer contributions. And this is kind of one of the trickier ones in Secure. If a 401k, 403b, or 457 plan allows it, an employee can elect to designate some or all of his contributions, or the employer contributions, the match, or the non-elective, whatever it's going to be, to get Roth treatment. And remember what I said before, Roth means it's taxed going in, it's not going to be taxed on the way out. So first of all, the plan has to allow for it, and then the individual participant would have to elect it. And there's lots of reasons this gets tricky, but you have to adapt the payroll system to allow for this, and you have to adapt the record-keeping system to allow for this, and then you've got to make them play nice together to make them work. This was actually allowable in 2023, but I haven't seen anyone, though, who's figured out how exactly to make it work. And nobody's really ready for this yet, but it's out there, and I'm sure there are going to be employers that decide that this is something they want to do, and they want to give their participants the choice to be able to make those Roth contributions rather than non-taxable contribution. A third one is something which has gotten a lot of talk, but again, it's one of those things that's a little bit difficult, and so nobody's quite figured out how to do this yet. It's an emergency savings account. This is where someone can set up a sort of sidecar account within a 401k plan that is for emergency savings. It'll have the payroll deduction be put in the plan, put in a secure investment, and then someone can make withdrawals on it when he or she needs to have some of that employee savings on it. It's limited $2,500 in the account, so it's not a real big limit of what somebody could put in there. But it would be more available for withdrawals from plan assets than the other plan assets would be. This is kind of getting even less interest than some of the other provisions so far. I think that's because while it's a good intention sort of thing to have that employee savings account, there are a lot of people saying, I'm not sure the 401k plan is the right way to do this. And for an Insperity client, they can designate money being set up in a regular savings account, not part of a plan, and have that automatically deducted as well. So it's not so necessary to put something like that in a 401k plan. And then a fourth provision I'm going to talk about, which is optional, is what's called a starter 401k plan. And this is a new plan type. It's going to be available in 2024. It's a 401k plan that's employee contributions only. It has automatic enrollment, and it has a lower limit on contributions. And it can only be adopted by an employer that doesn't currently have a plan. And there's something similar for 403b plans called a safe harbor 403b plan. My take on this one is meant to provide an alternative to the state-run retirement plans that Brian was alluding to earlier. But there's some people don't necessarily want to give their money to the state. They'd rather have a plan set up for that, and I can certainly understand that. The thing I would point out with this is that type of plan, a starter 401k plan, can be eligible for the tax credit I talked about earlier, whereas having a state-run retirement plan is not necessarily going to be. So this is something which somebody who's trying to dip his toe into the 401k world, this might be a way for that particular employer to go.
Okay, thank you for taking us through that. Obviously, there's a lot more information. This is really just an overview, but hopefully it's giving some good food for thought for the folks on the call today to think about the options that are coming. John, I do want to come back and really go ahead.
And let me just kind of add to that. What you were saying there's a lot more detail than what we're able to go to in a webinar like this. And that's where we can talk about it generally, but many of our customers are going to want to talk to their advisors to see what's going to be right for them. As you alluded to, they can talk to one of our BPAs to find out how they can fit in within the Insperity ecosystem. We have consultants here that they can talk to really about specifics, because this is a lot to go through and a lot to understand.
Indeed. So, John, maybe you can just help us understand about the required provisions that are coming to effect. Can you give us a sense of how Insperity's retirement plan is making those adjustments to respond to these new requirements?
Sure. Definitely, we're going to have all the required provisions in place when those are needed to be in place. So, for example, the 3-year long-term part-time, the simple limits, the minimum distributions, we're definitely going to be ready to execute on these when the flag drops. We're already deep into programming the systems and changes in procedures. And we're going to be continuing that work into 24 as we get ready for those things that are going to be required for 2025. We're also working on our payroll systems, because we have clients who want to do things there. And of course, as a payroll provider, even beyond what we do for record keeping as a payroll provider, we're going to have clients who want these optional provisions. So we're bringing these things online. Some of them are requiring a fair amount of development just to make sure that we can do it the right way for our customers. We want to be able to give our customers, if they want a Roth employer or they want to have a starter 401k, that they'll be able to have that done. The challenge we have with some of these optional provisions specifically is what was in the law was more conceptual than it was guidance. And so there are many cases, a lot more questions than we have answers to. we get the general gist of what they're doing, but it's going to take some guidance from the Department of Labor and the Internal Revenue Service to help us really understand how they're going to interpret this. Until then, we're going to use good faith compliance, but that's always one of those things. You think you're doing it the right way, but then the regulation comes out and, oh, we've got to change what we're doing there. Shouldn't deter people, but it is something which there's that caution flag that's out there.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll continue to stay on top of those as that guidance continues to come out, and in helping our clients think specifically about how those opportunities create advantages for them and their employees going forward. So, Brian, again, I want to come back to this from an HR strategy standpoint. These kinds of employee financial benefits really speak to the notion of the full life cycle, or full employee life cycle, right? So you got stages of career that are being impacted by emergency savings, for people who are just able to start saving money, student loan matching, people maybe in the early to mid part of their careers who are looking to try to make those long-term investments in their retirement and then offsetting the debt that they have. Catch-up contributions for people who haven't been able to save enough but can do more towards the end of their career. All of these are aimed at creating that successful retirement, culminating from that successful career. So, maybe you could speak to us a little about how this full employee life cycle approach to comp and total rewards helps us achieve that goal, and how we here at Insperity aspire for the idea around long-term employment. How does that all factor together?
Sure. So at Insperity, we're making an investment in our early talent and internship programs, bring in high potentials and develop them while they're here. So having a student loan matching program would really help alleviate that financial stress on college graduates that are entering the workforce. And I vaguely remember how I felt in my first job. And at that time, if I knew I'd get $1,000 match for paying $1,000 to my loans, I could probably live on ramen noodles for a little while longer and really get a head start on my savings journey. So that student loan matching program would provide an additional opportunity for us to show how Insperity continues to be so much more than a paycheck. It underscores the fact that we have continuously find ways to show how much we care about our people and want to build a long and fulfilling career with us. Now, on the secure catch-up provisions, that really helps employees that may put off investing in their retirement because they're raising families, they're putting kids through college, they're taking care of aging parents, allows them to shift their financial priorities back to investing in their future self, so they have that nest egg for retirement. And I saw in the Q&A some questions like, hey, look, I'm getting some pushback or resistance to taking the first step in saving for retirement. And hey, look, I'm going to put this disclaimer down at the bottom, no financial advisor, but if you think about it, time and market is more important than timing the market. Over almost every 10-year period, if you look back in the stock market, it's been a positive return. And if you're seeing this more flexibility and encouraging saving and investment in the market, that could, have a future impact that's positive for everyone. So, yes, it takes some education. It takes some risk to think about and prioritize. Hey, like when I'm not working anymore, I want to make sure I have a good life. You got to think about it early, but there's no better time to do it than now sometimes. And then looking at the emergency provisions, and I could see some of the challenges with the administration of it. It's not easy to get money out in an emergency. That's what you really need. But I can see how the intent was important because, a lot of times you set it and forget it in your retirement plan. But unexpected situations happen in life. And, when you're in a financial bind and you need to access the money, this gives you the opportunity to do it. Quick key is, can I do it quickly? Because, hey, I might be literally saving someone's life because of this, one of my loved ones. So, forecasting of the future, if I look at all of our provisions that have been implemented, and as an employer, and you're looking at a total awards approach, what we focus on is a couple of things. One, really help people understand that we have an objective approach to our compensation. We offer the value of big company benefits, flexible work, a learning approach to career development, and all of this combined together reinforces our people-centric culture. And that's what a total rewards piece looks like. It's more than just compensation. So when our employees feel and know that we care about them, we want to invest in their career and help them feel safe and secure while they work with us, they'll tend to stay with us long term.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really helpful kind of way to think about it. Certainly borne fruit for Insperity, and I know we strive to serve our clients in the same way.
Yeah.
So again, John, I'd like to kind of wrap this up here, thinking about those clients who use Insperity's 401k plan. How will we be communicating with them on the new features as they roll out? And for those clients, Insperity clients who are not currently offering a 401k plan or maybe utilizing another provider, let's talk about how some of the benefits of considering including the Insperity Retirement Services Plan as part of their overall compensation strategy going forward.
Yeah, really good question, Michael. As I've been scrolling through some of the questions that our listeners have put out there, I think one of the best things that we've been able to do with a webinar like this is to start the education process. Obviously, many of our customers, many of the participants in the Q&A were either unaware of it or they don't really understand how this is going to impact their 401k plan. Those who use Insperity's 401k plan, again, we're going to have all the required stuff in place in plenty of time for us to be able to put it out there. And what we're doing is we're gradually rolling out communications about this. The challenge we always have with communications is if you do it too soon, it's forgotten by the time it goes into effect. But if you do it too late, people don't have the time to react. So what we're doing is we're going to make sure our 401k plan has everything that needs to be done. And again, just put another little plug in here, since we handle both the payroll and the record keeping, if you're in the Insperity 401k plan, some of those integration issues between those providers is simplified for our customers because it's either Insperity doing it or it's Insperity doing it. So either way, Insperity is doing it for them. They don't have to negotiate between two different providers. But we're doing this webinar, we're doing flyers, we've got posts on Premier, we have posts on Insperity.com to start the education process of our clients to understand these are the things that are going to be changing. We're going to be shortly sending out information about the part-time, long-term part-time rules that I talked about earlier so that those clients that are affected, that are in the Insperity plan, will know this is how it's going to impact them. The client who is using a different record keeper will be able to give that client general information, but it's going to have to go to its record keeper to say, how is this going to be impacted in my plan? So I would encourage them to say, well, how is this going to work for me? If they've got a simple IRA someplace else, go to that provider. How is that going to impact me? There's a lot of detail, a lot of nuance. I think, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but the whole act was 358 pages long. And even though, again, that was that long, there still wasn't a lot of detail in some of these things. So some of this is going to be very specific to the plan and the specifics of that particular client involved. So we're going to let everybody know how it's going to impact them within the 401k plan. We'll let them know generally how it's going to impact if they have a plan someplace that they sell. We can't give tax advice on the tax credit. They're going to have to go to their advisor, be it an attorney, accountant, whomever, to see how it's going to impact in their particular circumstances. We can give them, at least point them in the right direction and say, this is where you need to go. So there's a lot of detail here that we're going to start rolling out as is the appropriate time for this. And those things which are going to be required in 2024, we're going to be really concentrating on so that our customers will know what's going to impact them and when it's going to impact them. But again, we've got this from both a payroll and a record keeping standpoint. We're going to make sure our customers have what they need when they need it so that they can be able to react as they need to be able to react.
Okay, so as you can see, there's a lot of detail. John mentioned it. There's a lot that you have to consider when it comes to this topic. So Brian and John, I want to thank you for taking us through this and for helping us think through these opportunities that Secure 2.0 offers in the time ahead. Again, let me encourage you, visit Insperity.com. There's a banner on the homepage that says, what is Secure 2.0? It'll take you to an introductory section. Again, it's just a primer, but it's a good way to get started. And again, we encourage you to reach out to your service team to find out more information about how we can contextualize this information to your particular situation. So rest assured, as developments continue to progress, we'll make every effort to keep you fully informed. With any compliance-related topic, the details are obviously critically important, but we know that it's taking those details and then contextualizing it to your situation and to your business that ultimately makes the difference. So here at Insperity, we certainly aspire to serve our clients with a breadth and depth and level of care that we believe is unique, but we don't simply inform, we try to inspire you to think about how to consider an overall sound people strategy, including the details around compensation, benefits, retirement, how they can really make the difference in helping you achieve your business goals. As we said, for the Insperity clients on the call today, we'd love to hear from you on which of the new features of the legislation may be most impactful to you, to your employees. We'd like to have you support. We want to support you and consider the various compensation and benefit plan offerings that can give you a unique advantage in the marketplace. So let me encourage you to reach out to your service team again and continue that discussion. If you're not an Insperity client, now would be a great time to consider speaking to one of Insperity's certified business performance advisors. We have them in your local market, and we would love to learn more about your business and how these and other human capital strategies can accelerate and optimize your business performance in the year ahead. So thank you, everyone. For those of you who were not able to get to your questions, we will make every effort to follow up with you on those specific questions if we're able to. But thank you for your engagement today. Thank you for your time. We look forward to seeing you again on the next session of the Insperity Business Resiliency Series webcast. So until then, thanks for joining us, and we hope you have a great week.